Hello Maniacs, and welcome back to another episode of Cult Classic Mania. I'm your host Matthew, and I'm excited to announce that we are officially on the crap-ass little podcast network featuring us, slashers, copulators that first, and the worst horror podcast. And I am excited to work alongside everyone and create one central location for all of our content so everyone can enjoy it all at once. Again, thank you Jake for allowing us to be on your awesome network, and I'm very excited to work alongside everyone in the future. Secondly, Cult Classic Mania will be hosting a Trome-tastic giveaway, so if you want to know how you can be entered into the contest, please listen until the end of the episode and find out how you can be entered into this Trome-mazing contest. And lastly, I will be covering Akira for this week, and it's near and dear to my heart. It's one of my favorite animes of all time, so the format will be different compared to what it's usually like, and I won't be going scene by scene. I'm basically pouring my heart out, and this is a love letter to Akira, if you will. So I know that you're used to my usual format of going scene by scene, but this will be a little bit different. Next week's episode will be back to the usual format, but this week, this is a special one, and I'm going to be diving a lot into Akira. So I hope you guys enjoy this week's episode of Akira from 1980.
We come in peace.
Yeah.
Fuck ass, give me a beer!
Yeah, welcome back to the cinema. This is not for the typical. Time to feed the occipital lobe with the films that I call my home. Buckle up, settle in, while we break it down a bit. Got a new take, make an old film relevant. But to give attention to the unsung revenants of the film industry, that's a wrap, let's riff.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Cult Classic Mania.
Hey Maniacs, it's your host Matthew, and welcome back to another episode of Cult Classic Mania, a podcast dedicated to the low-budget disasters that we all know and love. Not all of them are low budget, but they definitely can be disasters. This week we are talking about Akira from 1988, but first, please go ahead and rate and review wherever you listen to us on, either Apple Podcasts, or you can go ahead and rate us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cult Classic Mania. You can follow us on Twitter at CCMPod. Facebook, again, like I mentioned, and our new Instagram page as well, Cult Classic Mania. Wherever you're on social media, go ahead and follow us. Like I mentioned just a moment ago, I will be covering Akira from 1988. However, the format will be just slightly different than the usual format, as I feel like going scene by scene will not accurately portray the film in the right light, if you will, and instead I'm going to go ahead and highlight the major underlying themes, as well as go over the important scenes, the scenes that I believe that are important, and also talk about the emotions behind it, and the film's production, all the production that went into it, because there was a lot of effort and time put into this film. I don't think a lot of people realize how important that aspect of Akira was. Like, there were 7 different film production companies backing this film, and there were a lot of people involved and a lot of work put into it. I can't stress that enough. Like, this is beyond the typical anime that you're used to nowadays. With all that being said, go ahead and kick back, relax, or if you're driving, go ahead and just listen along, because this one is going to be a long one, I'm feeling like, and it's a roller coaster, but it's a fun roller coaster. It's a sad roller coaster, but you know what? This will be Akira from 1988. Akira was directed by Katsuhiro Otomo, who is known for Neo Tokyo, Steam Boy, Metropolis, and much, much more. And it was also written by Katsuhiro Otomo, based off of the manga, the 6-volume manga that came out before this. I believe the last volume of the manga came out a year after, or a year or two after Akira, the film came out, but it was written and directed by him. Originally, I guess he didn't want it to be a film. I guess a bunch of production companies were like, this would be a huge film if you put it out, because this manga is a massive roller coaster. There's so many emotions behind it. There's so many underlying themes within this manga. I think it deserves to be a film. And originally, like I said, he didn't want it to be a film. The main well-known voice actors of Akira was Nozomu Sasaki, who plays Tetsuo, and he was known for Akira, Die Buster, and Dark Side Blues. And there's also Mami Kayoma, who plays Ki. She was known for Pokemon Forever, Dragon Ball Z Mystic Adventure, as well as Mitsuo Iwata, who plays Shotaro and he was known for Dead Leaves, Paprika, and Time Stranger. Akira was released July 16th, 1988. It was released a day after Die Hard, and this will be important later on. And Die Hard alone grossed around $140.8 million. However, with Akira, the budget was at least $9 million estimated, and box office-wise in Japan, it made $1.5 billion. Worldwide, $49 million, totaling into $1,549 million. With inflation, you can go ahead and estimate that to about $3,295,873,947. That number alone just blows my fucking mind. I think this is probably the highest grossing anime ever, if I recall. It's just, I think this may be the highest grossing film of all time, honestly. I've never seen any bigger number hitting that. I've never seen a film grossing $1 billion. And that's not even counting the VHS release. Like, the VHS release, whenever it eventually went to a home video, it grossed around $80 million, I think. I'm not sure what that was inflation-wise. But again, $80 million, and there was a made-for-TV version, which that's the one that I watched. I remember the made-for-TV version. I remember it was played on Adult Swim. And Adult Swim, if I recall correctly, at least in the early 2000s, they didn't play a lot of anime. I remember watching Cowboy Bebop, but that was about it. If you don't already know what Akira is about, the story takes place in a futuristic Neo-Tokyo, rebuilt from the ashes of the original Tokyo that was nuked years before. Motorcycle gangs and drug lords own the streets of Neo-Tokyo once the sun sets, and best friends and personal rivals, Tetsuo and Kaneda, are teenagers who care about three things only: girls, bikes, and drugs. And there is a sequence of events that cause Tetsuo to be in an accident, and he is turned to what is known as Akira throughout the film. And this is leading to one of possibly the best string of action sequences in anime history. Like I mentioned just a moment ago, Akira was a film that had 7 different film production companies and investors backing the film. The film was brought to life by 12 to 24 different drawings a second. And with that, there was also, the film consisted of 12,212 shots and 160,000 single pictures, all of which were hand-drawn, mind you, and consisted of over 327 different colors. Also, Akira is the first and only anime, if you will, to be shot in 24 frames per second. I can't stress this enough. The amount of effort that went into the creation of Akira, this masterpiece, it can't go unnoticed. Akira is still widely known as easily one of the greatest animes of all time. I can't stress this enough. Seriously, it's still mind-boggling after watching it so many times in my lifetime. I just love watching this film over and over again. I've never seen anything like it, honestly. Again, Akira is on a totally different level. It's even comparing to relatives, if you will. Like, I'm a massive fan of shows like Death Note, the manga Battle Royale, Cowboy Bebop, Full Metal Alchemist, but those films, shows, and mangas, they don't even come close to Akira's superiority. The massive attention to detail, while it's still in this chaotic world, and the emotional roller coaster that you put on throughout this film, is just something that I've never seen before. And I've been a film fan for at least half of my lifetime. It's still insane to me. And I mentioned that Akira was one of the first and only animes to be shot in 24 frames per second. And if you feel like looking at a higher resolution of Akira, there is a guy on YouTube. His name is Shanghai Dandy, I believe that's how you pronounce it. And he recreates Akira in 60 frames per second. Usually I don't like remakes or heightened resolutions of films that were created way back when, but this is the most crisp I've ever seen Akira, or at least bits and pieces of Akira. It's honestly mind-boggling. It's amazing. Just go ahead and, if you're on YouTube at all, go ahead and go to Shanghai Dandy channel and just go ahead and check his stuff out. It's incredible. It's awesome what he's doing with his work. I guess the biggest issue people had with Akira was the film was only the first half of volume 1 of the manga and the last half of volume 6 of the manga. Now, I'm going to be honest, I've never read the manga. I've only watched the anime. I do read manga. It's just that I didn't read Akira. I just only watched the film. And me personally, like I mentioned, I've never read it, so I'm not that upset about it. And however, this film still ends up being a 2-hour-long epic. And any longer than that, I believe that probably would be a disservice to the original adaptation, being the manga. And with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into Akira from 1988. The opening sequence, we get a location and timestamp of Tokyo, July 16th, 1988. The opening scene is a very iconic scene because not only is it haunting, but it's also a highlight or a metaphor, if you will, of the dropping of the atomic bomb of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And there's also a bunch of animes that came out at the time, sort of, I guess, mourning or realizing what had happened during those time periods of devastation. And there's another good anime that came out a couple years, I would say about 2 decades before, Barefoot Generation. If you haven't yet, go ahead and check that anime out. I can't remember the director's name off the top of my head, but he really encapsulates the emotions and basically the aftermath of what he had witnessed as a survivor of the dropping of the atomic bomb. And again, I highly recommend it. It's very emotional, and it's a roller coaster, but it's honestly incredible. I highly recommend it, like I mentioned. After that, after the nuke happens, we get a timestamp and location of 31 years after World War III, after death, 2019 in Neo Tokyo, and not even 5 minutes into the film, we're met with just unruly chaos as Tetsuo and Kaneda join forces with their gang to chase after the clown biker gang that you're met with throughout the entire film. And the gang members are going throughout Tokyo, just destroying everything in their path. They're throwing bombs into the cars. They're just bursting through. I think at one point they burst through a restaurant and just ruined everyone's dinner. And they're just causing havoc like it's nobody's business. And there's a point where the Tetsuo, he goes off on his own. This is later on in the film. And there's a child that's been affected by the bomb that had happened. Because while all this chaos is happening, there just seemed to be a massive explosion, and there was riots that were happening after that, and just all hell broke loose. And there was a child that has been affected by the bomb, and he was being saved by an armed man, but the police thinks the guy that is protecting the child, and he thinks he's a threat, and they end up killing the man just for protecting the child, and tells the child to leave, the child that's affected. And I should mention, going on, there's a lot of blood in this film. They're really graphic. Like, anytime there's a hit, anytime there's a shot, clearly there's going to be a lot of blood when someone's shot. But even, like, the simplest slap, there's a ton of blood. So, if you're weird about blood, I guess don't watch it. It's a cartoon, so don't be too freaked out about it. Yeah, it's just like, they shoot him, and he just bleeds out everywhere. Later down the film, like I mentioned, Tetsuo is riding down the road from the opposite side, and ends up crashing into the child, causing an explosion. And eventually, this is when we are met with the resistance. And later on, Kaneda and the gang are leaving the jail after trying to look for Tetsuo, and the resistance ended up throwing them in jail. And we're back at a testing facility where they are all analyzing Tetsuo, and the scientists believe that Tetsuo is the answer behind Akira. Akira is basically a war machine that they're trying to create, and they're testing all of these children. Eventually, we'll see, I believe it's 2 other children besides the child that was attempting to be saved. They are getting this medication, and they're getting this quote-unquote treatment, and they're trying to create a gigantic war machine. And later that night, the nurse who is looking after Tetsuo, she's going to administer his medication, and she notices that Tetsuo has officially escaped. He ran off to go back to the orphanage at which he resides at with Kaneda and all of his other friends. And that afternoon, Tetsuo and Ki, which is a girl that he is in love with, he wants to try to run away from everything. He's like, I just got to get the hell out of here, man. I'm in love with you, but we got to get out of here. And he ends up stealing Kaneda's bike. While they leave, they run into the clowns, and there's a really graphic scene where the clowns rip Ki's shirt off, and they just beat her to a pulp, basically. Yeah, it's really graphic. There's some nudity in it. And at this point, Kaneda and the gang, they end up meeting up with Aki and Tetsuo. And this is when Tetsuo's anger really starts to unfold and lashes out at the king. He's tired because Tetsuo is always being picked on. They're always calling him names because he was the smallest kid of the bunch, and they just made fun of him a bunch of times. So you really see his anger start to unfold, and he's really starting to boil inside, but also realizing not realizing that he has powers yet, but he realizes something is overcoming him, and he's not content with it whatsoever. And at this point, this is when the film starts to slow down, except for a scene where Kaneda and one of the girls are running through a sewer and trying to evade another bombing that just happened. They also run into another guard from the CRC, which is also part of the resistance, and chasing after an infected child, if you will. This is the same child from earlier, and Kaneda ends up shooting the guard, and they run off. There's some parts where it kind of dies down a bit, but sort of to give you a breather, if you will, because there is a lot that happens in this film. There's a lot of emotion into it. There's a lot of roller coasters, if you will. And it's a good breather to have. However, one issue that I did have about 35 or 40 minutes into the film, full-blown psychedelic mode, if you will, where it gets very convoluted to where I don't understand what's happening, honestly. I had to rewatch a few parts, but Tetsuo, he is having a strange, trippy dream, I guess. Well, it's not a dream, it's just that he's thinking about it, of the other infected child. But the infected child is talking to the sergeant that is a part of the resistance. She is predicting basically the bombing that's going to happen not too long from now, and said that it was all Akira's fault. And Akira is he's not happy with the result, that it's his fault. And this is when Akira's powers are starting to honestly just manifest itself to an all-powerful being. Meanwhile, this is happening. The council and the CRC, or the resistance, if you will, they're basically arguing over the threats on the city and the lack of security, which, mind you, they've had full-on armies whenever anything chaotic is happening, and just causing even more havoc than it needs to be. At this point, Tetsuo, he did escape, but he's back in the hospital bed later that night, and he's having a strange dream. I don't know if it was a dream sequence or not, but he's dreaming of a small car, a bunny, and a bear crawling on his bed, and slowly becoming a terrifying nightmare of his, of all of the animals basically coming into one large creature and attacking him. And later on, you'll notice this creature coming to life again and following him throughout the film and just trying to attack him. And this is when, because Kaneda, he was running through the sewers looking for Tetsuo, and he is eventually captured into that sewer where the resistance is. And Kaneda, he escapes with the key from the sewer jail, I guess, if you will. Meanwhile, this is when Tetsuo, again, he's slowly becoming Akira more and more. And this is when Tetsuo is starting to realize that he's Akira at this point. There's another girl that's affected, like I mentioned before, and she is starting to tell him that he is Akira. However, he needs to take hold of his powers, because he can be an all-powerful being. And after about an hour and 20 minutes in the film, if you will, this is when Akira starts to really unfold and causing just mass chaos with a very large explosion like the child had mentioned before that's going to happen. And in response to the massive explosion, Tokyo just erupts into mass chaos with protests and murder. We eventually see at one point that there is a man that kills a dog for some reason, and the army is attempting to control Akira, but Akira, every time that they try to shoot at him or they try to capture him, he just keeps getting stronger and stronger. And everyone keeps warning Akira that he needs to learn to control his powers. At this point, I'm going to keep calling him Akira because he's full-blown Akira mode. He is still Tetsuo, but he is forming into Akira more. But he doesn't listen to anyone, as he basically creates destruction wherever he goes. So as much to hurting his own brother out of spite. And he also goes to the usual bar that they hang out at. And there's a usual bartender that's working there. And I guess the bartender is just heckling him. He's just playing fun with him. and Tetsuo ends up killing him out of pure anger, because he just doesn't know how to control his anger, and he doesn't know how to control his powers. And at this point, Akira, he is later on, because he mentions that his final standoff will be at the Olympic Stadium. And this is when the drugs are starting to wear off, and he's starting to unfold even more. Like, we think he's unstoppable at this point, right? But this is like his final form, if you will. And he kills the sergeant of the resistance that's trying to capture him. And his body starts to morph into what is known as the Akira body. And his arm is starting to return to this robotic, gross-looking arm. And he just ends up turning into this gross alien creature thing. I can't even describe it, really. And from what I've read, whenever they were creating this creature and drawing him out, they drew piece by piece of all the things morphing into Akira's body, like piece by piece. Like, there are multiple pieces going into this morphing, but it's just amazing. Again, the attention to detail is out of this world. And there is another, of course, iconic scene where Tetsuo is morphing into the final form of Akira, and this is when he is consuming everyone getting away. There's a part where I believe it's Ki and Kaneda, they're going back into the Olympic Stadium to attempt to save Akira, but one of the infected children says, hey, you don't really want to go near him because he morphs into everything that's around him. So they didn't listen, and they end up get their body sucked into the Akira body, if you will. And towards the end, the 3 infected children, they end up sacrificing themselves and creating a nuclear explosion and causing explosion erupting throughout Neo-Tokyo. And it ends with the destruction of the entire city with only the 3 survivors, and ends up killing Tetsuo. And that was the end of Akira from 1988. Man, I can't portray this movie correctly, even if I tried, because even going scene by scene, it would just take a long time, because this movie is a 2-hour-long film, and it's just one of those films where you have to witness it yourself to be able to understand and grasp what's going on. I tried the best I can. I still don't think I gave it the justice it's deserved, but all I could say is just sit down and watch Akira for your sake. It's sort of the gateway drug into anime, if you will, and honestly, there are no other animes out there that have been able to reach Akira's level. And I've been a film fan for as long as I can remember, and I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like Akira. I know I seem like I'm overhyping it, but I think I'm hyping it to a certain level where it's like one of those movies that you have to watch before you die, kind of thing. Like, I know there's a 1001 movies list movies that you should watch before you die. I'm pretty sure this is on it. I'm not entirely sure, but if it isn't, it should be. It's just not enough I could say about this film, honestly. And I did mention just a moment ago that this film is sort of long. It's about 2 hours and 5 minutes. But I think the pacing is good for what it is and what it's about. It's really chaotic, though. The pacing is good, but it is extremely chaotic. However, there are slowdown times to where you can kind of take a breather, because most of the time you are literally at the edge of your seat the entire time, except for the slowdown parts. Like, I've seen this movie countless times, and I'm still surprised about how much the action is ramped up every time, because I'm like, okay, I can finally calm down now. I can not be emotional right now. I can just take a chill pill. But as soon as you do that, you're just like on the edge of your seat again, wait for something else to happen. It's such an amazing cinema experience. I honestly wish I could have been around to be able to watch this in theaters. I would love to find maybe a vintage theater nearby to eventually play it, because that would be an amazing theatrical experience to be able to witness that film. It's just mind-boggling to me. I mean, anime in general from that time period, from like the late 60s to the early 80s, well, mid to late 80s, and it was so unknown from the Western world. Like Japan, they knew what anime was all about. They weren't consuming it as much, but it still wasn't known in the Western world like in America. And they had so much freedom, Akira and the director, to where they could just create this beautiful, chaotic world and have so many underlying themes like police brutality, and just showing that you can create your own destruction and it's just manifesting itself. There's psychedelic imagery going on. There's all this crazy mass murdering going on, political and political disbelief and everything. There's just like all this stuff going on, and they somehow made a not so convoluted, amazing piece of art. I still can't comprehend it. I don't think you can be able to pull this off in modern day, honestly, because anime is pretty set in stone at this point, and you really can't recreate the wheel, if you will. I feel like this is just slowly turning into an Akira love letter, and people are just gonna think of like, this guy's fucking obsessed with anime, apparently. It's honestly one of my favorite films of all time, and I just can't encourage you enough to watch it. But yeah, that was the end of Akira from 1988. You can pretty much find it on any streaming service that you have available to you, except for Netflix. It's on Hulu. If you got a Hulu subscription, you can go ahead and watch it on damnbro.tv.com. I believe this is the website I watched it on. And that was the English sub version. I think Hulu had the English sub version. And it's not on Prime Video. It's probably on YouTube, most likely. Because just do a simple Google search, and honestly, you can get at least 1 million results of how to watch Akira for free if you want to. And last year, there was the 30th anniversary, I believe, of Akira, if I got my math right. And they put out a really cool Akira box set. I don't have it, but I've seen people that post it, and it looks really fucking cool. So if you have the money, I know I don't, but if you do, go ahead and spend that money on that fucking cool box set, because I'm jealous of anybody that bought that Blu-ray. And I don't even own a Blu-ray player, so it's just, again, just go watch the film. It's probably the greatest movie of all time for me, honestly. Again, that was the end of Akira from 1988. And on to the contest that I have been hinting at for the last couple of weeks now. And that contest will run from March 4th through March 18th. And that one lucky winner will win a free 2-disc combo of The Toxic Avenger. It is going to be a Blu-ray and DVD combo at a $17.49 value. And it is the HD re-release for the 30th anniversary of The Toxic Avenger. It will be new intro from Lloyd Kaufman. There's commentary from the guy who played Toxie himself, the guy that played Melvin as well, and commentary from Lloyd Kaufman and rare interviews from the co-founder, Michael Herz, as well as behind the scenes and a cool and in-depth production slideshow, as well as original Troma trailers. And it's just a really cool package of The Toxic Avenger. I know it has nothing to do with Akira, but it's just gonna be a cool giveaway, and it's also with that Toxic Avenger giveaway. It's gonna include 25 set of posters. I think it was maybe 11 by 11 size posters, little mini posters to go along with it. It's gonna be a randomized group of posters. I don't even know what posters I'm gonna get whenever I receive it in the mail. So it's just going to be a complete surprise, and I think you guys will enjoy this awesome contest. And to enter this contest, you have to first be 17 or older, because this film is an R-rated film, and you must be U.S.-based only, because we have listeners in the U.K., we have some listeners in Canada, as well as Australia, but unfortunately, and there's a lot of issues with shipping overseas, and I think there's a law against giveaways or something like that in Canada where you can't ship overseas. I don't know. It's just a whole stipulation. I don't want to get into it, and I don't want to get into any trouble. So, it's only U.S.-based. The time this episode airs, I will be posting a giveaway picture that you can be able to screenshot on Instagram. So, if you're on Instagram, go to our Instagram page at Cult Classic Mania. Go ahead and repost that onto your page using at Cult Classic Mania, as well as the hashtag Toxie Please and CCM Giveaway. Lastly, you have to be following us on Instagram at Cult Classic Mania, or else you won't be eligible for this giveaway, and I'll just pick the next person in line that happens to be following us, because it will make it easier for me to realize who's following and who's not following and who's not a bot, just all those things. Yeah, that's all you got to do to enter this contest. You got exactly 2 weeks until that contest ends, and you got from March 4th to March 18th, like I had mentioned before. But yeah, good luck, and I hope you have a trumtastic time entering this awesome giveaway. So, yeah, there's that. That has been this episode of Akira from 1988. And next week, I'll be talking about Pool Party Massacre from 2017, directed by Drew Marvick. And I had mentioned a couple episodes ago that I will be having Drew Marvick on later in July. So, be excited for that. It'll be a cool interview just to talk more about the film and his directing career in general. And with all of that being said, I am your host, Matthew, and this has been another installment of Cult Classic Mania. Talk to you all next week.
We come in peace.
Fuck ass, give me a beer!
Yeah, welcome back to the cinema. This is not for the typical. Time to feed the occipital lobe with the films that I call my home. Buckle up, settle in, while we break it down a bit. Got a new take, make an old film relevant. But to give attention to the unsung revenants of the film industry, that's a wrap, let's riff.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Cult Classic Mania.